Ethan, nice job on your narrative essay. You answered all the questions and you used your imagination. I never noticed that on the trailer that you saw in the picture that it said Team Jesus, because at first I'm like, well, he named them Team Jesus, and then I was looking at the picture again and I saw Team Jesus on it. So I thought that was interesting. You noticed that. I've never noticed that. I've been there many times. Only found one spelling error right here. Everything else was good. I liked your imagination and how you were able to take that picture and create a whole scene. You definitely created conflict. Actually, several types of conflict, it seemed like, because you had people chasing, they were trying to get back to America. They had angry people thinking they were being poisoned and misled. So it was a good job on creating your conflict. And so we're going to move from the just the paragraph into an essay, a narrative essay. And we're going to use a new technique called central fact for this next writing. And central fact just means that you state a fact about the picture before you start into your story. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize these. And here are the pictures I'm going to give you to use. And here's your score from the rubrics of your narrative paragraph. And like I said, the only thing I caught was one spelling error. Otherwise, very, very nice. So here are your pictures. I'm going to give you 3 pictures, and you have to decide how do you get from one to the other. And I put one picture that kind of has a built-in conflict. The others don't. You're going to have to create the conflict, but I did keep them kind of in the same setting, which will make it a little bit easier. But let me tell you about what a central fact is. A central fact is when you look at the picture and you just state a fact about it. Let's see if I can type on here. So if you looked at this picture, a fact is something we all agree on. He rested his arm on the, I don't know what that's called. It's a bale of hay. That's a fact. He rested his arm on the bale of hay. Or maybe he placed his arm on the bale of hay. Or he steadied the gun by resting his arm on the bale of hay. So a central fact is just a central fact. And you pick a central fact for each of your pictures. Oh, where's my typing going? Oh, there it goes. And for the horse one, you could say the horses stared at the man that came up from behind them. It's a central fact. Here you could say there were new logs on the fire. Or you could say the fire was surrounded by rocks. So you come up with the central fact, and then you start using the questions that you used before. Who is the story about? What happened before the story? Why is this happening? What is the history behind it? How do the characters feel? What do they think? What's happening outside of the pictures? What's going to happen after? How are they going to act? Or how is one of our words. I always think about answer the questions that your mother might ask you if you say, I'm going to go out. She'd say, well, who are you going with? What are you guys going to do? How many people are going to be there? What are you going to do after? So try and answer all of those questions, and I'll have a list of those questions on the rubrics again. But when you're using 3 pictures. Each of these pictures will help develop one of your paragraphs, but you'll start with your central fact. Let me get a blank page so I can draw what it's going to look like. It's very similar to our research paper in that we're going to have a central fact. So your narrative essay is going to have 3 paragraphs, and each paragraph is going to have a central fact. Oh, I put clincher. It's supposed to have a clincher too. A central fact, and that is a fact. Look at the picture and state a fact. And then you build your story using your imagination from that central fact. And so the first one, he's resting his gun on the bale of hay. And then you can just use your imagination. His eyes were steady as he followed the deer, and I don't know if that's a deer gun or not. I know nothing about guns. A deer through the forest, or he could be tracking a person. But a central fact is he rested his arm on the bale of hay as he steadied the gun. That is a central fact. And you're going to pick different facts. So just pick a fact from the picture and bring your story together with it. So how are you going to go from here to here to here? And that's your imagination. So he's going to be resting his arm, and then there's going to be horses involved on a hillside, and then there's going to be a campfire involved. But you can really use these pictures in any order. You can pick the order. But you're going to have to come up with the story that uses them all. So like if you wanted to do the gun, the horse, and the fire, you could do it in that order. Or you might have them sitting by the fire devising a plan to go capture some horses, and they end up in a gunfight. So you can use any order that you want to, but start with the central fact that's about the picture so that I'll know which picture you're using, and then develop your story from there. And you develop your story by asking yourself the questions and then answering them, just like you did with your outline where you thought it through and you said, well, who's going to be in my story? And you can name your characters. You can even be in your own story if you want to. And that's a little bit easier. You can do it from first person, but sometimes it's harder. It's easier to attribute feelings to someone else sometimes. And so that is how we're going to work on our narrative essay. Remember, you're the narrator. You get to make up the story, and all good stories have conflict. So think about a conflict. And this is another, I don't know if your story will be long enough to do this, but this is how a story goes. You have rising conflict throughout your story, and then you reach the turning point. Every movie, every book you like follows this. And then the character has to decide something at this turning point. And once he just makes that decision, then everything else is kind of wrapped up. And hopefully, our goal is, in the movies that we really like and the books that we really like, is our character is better off at the end and has learned a valuable lesson. And so basically, when we're starting to write narratives, we want to create some type of conflict or chaos for our character. And then, right when he has this conflict going on, you make something else happen that creates more chaos in his life. And then you have more chaos in his life and more chaos in his life until you think he cannot take any more. And then you have your turning point. And you reach this turning point, and he has to make a decision. And once he makes that decision, then you know what path you're going to take. You wrap up all your loose ends, and hopefully your character is better off and has learned a valuable lesson from the beginning. We want our character to be different from the beginning to the end. But those are just some things to think about. That's a little bit more advanced, but that's where we're going with narrative writing. And if you think of every movie, it all started with a writer. Somebody had to follow that basic format. And if you think of your movies, this is how it always is. Someone dies at the beginning of a movie, or some tragedy happens, and your character's going along and having this nice normal life, and then boom, something happens, and he has to start making decisions. And so he moves forward, and he thinks he might be able to get over it, and then something else happens, and then something else, and something else, and he just gets to where he's going to explode or kill someone or do something or kill himself, and then something will happen that creates a turning point for him. So you can kind of think about that a little bit as you're writing. Right now we're going to work on getting good 3 paragraphs. You can write more if you need to. Sometimes it's hard to limit a story to 3 paragraphs, but I'm looking for 3 central facts. And if you start with the gun one, and it takes you a couple of paragraphs to develop that, that's fine. And then I'll see your next central fact, and that will be, let's say you put the fire in there, so then you'll give me a beginning sentence that's a central fact about the fire, and you can write 1 or 2 paragraphs about it. Some students I've had students write 30-page narratives on these pictures. Not these pictures, I always use different pictures. But once they get going, sometimes it's hard to stop. So try and limit it to maybe 5 pages at the max. And we may do a more elaborate narrative writing later once we get through the different types of essays that I want to get you through this year. If you have any questions, you can text me or email me or visit with me at Grace. So your assignment, I'll give you a week to work on it. Answer your questions, 3 good paragraphs, order the pictures any way you want to. Start each paragraph or each picture where you're talking about it with your central fact, and then just use your imagination. And if you have a movie or something you really like, look at the format of how that writer created that conflict. And a great movie comes together when you have a great writer that wrote it, and you have great actors that can pull off the emotions of the writer. I do not know why that always does that. Okay, that's the end of the video.